Thank you, Richard, for joining me for this interview today. I'm very grateful for your time. I'd like to start by asking you, what does the term adaptive reuse mean?
I guess repurposing an existing site or structure for a new purpose, but I'd extend it to say also for a change in the way that use is needed in a contemporary world. So it could be a maintenance of the very purpose for which the building was built, but adapting it to contemporary demands and needs. So it's repurposed or adapted in that sense.
And why do you feel, in terms of broader society and our cities, that is important? Why do we not simply demolish our buildings when their useful or their original design function is?
You'll see in cities like Sydney that are going through unsustainable growth periods, that if we did that, we'd be constantly living in a construction site with no ability in our lives to connect back to our earlier memories of place, of time, of circumstances. And I'm not just talking about historic events, grand public events, which are terribly critical in terms of the memory of who we are and where we've come from. But I'm talking about intimate moments, like when you first met your girlfriend on that corner shop, and now it's gone. And if all of these places where your memories are held, and they're held in the public realm in places, they're not only held historically in books and publications. So these places trigger memories and aspirations, and I think they're part of who we are, and they need to be respected. We can't keep all of them, of course, but we can't just demolish everything without thinking about it either.
Broadly speaking, in terms of your practice and your work, what do you notice as being some of the differences, whether they're challenges or opportunities, that you see when you're working within this adaptive reuse framework, rather than if you were building a completely new structure?
Well, there's the presumption, of course, that new is better. There's the presumption that the old is irrelevant. And often that's not challenged. I think the architect is a good person from a sort of a broader perspective of education and historic perspective and imagination of the future. An architect is a good person to challenge that presumption and see what can be held. I mean, I love the quote, and I've forgotten who said it, but the most sustainable building is the one that exists now. And I read some figures, again, the detail has escaped me, but in broad terms, you can replace an office building that exists, that is performing at a very miserable level of sustainability in terms of energy usage. You can replace it with the most state-of-the-art in terms of equal square metres, the most state-of-the-art sustainable energy minimal use structure. It will take decades, maybe 40 to 50 years, just to recoup the energy lost in demolishing the structure. So I think there's certainly a technical sustainability argument, but I think the most interesting argument is a cultural sustainability argument, a sense of a cultural continuity in where we are, how we've come to express ourselves, our communities and our values through built form. And I'm not just talking about architecture in a sort of a high-end sense. I'm talking about ordinary buildings. You know, the corner shop, as I said before, that's built solidly 100 years ago and can be repurposed for another few years. I think there's another issue about increasing density, and clearly when great increased density is required and justified, sometimes it's not possible to keep a memory, but you can sometimes keep a small memory. It may be a portal of a door. It may be a small reminder to people who know of what was there before. So even when it's a total rebuild, we don't need to obliterate the past. I like also working with artists on sites, because sometimes they have a more interesting and poetic way of looking at preserving and giving legible form to the past and to memory and to place in a way that we don't. And I think we can learn a lot from artists.
I'd like to end then with one final question, which is, in your experience of Sydney, is there a building, whether it's reasonably contemporary or slightly older, that you'd like to see one day be adapted if its current existing function had reached the end of its life?
It's hard to single out any one. I think it's the starting point of discussion for every project in the city. Why get rid of it? Why get rid of the embodied energy, the memory, social, the history, the craftsmanship that probably can't be replicated? Why disrupt the city unnecessarily by demolishing all of those things and rebuilding something? It's not to say that the answer is always to keep the past. It's not. But at least that's the beginning of the discussion.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Interesting discussion.